Welcome back. You're watching the Independent Republican Mike Graham. Rishi Sunak is trying to win back support of British farmers ahead of the general election, promising he has their back as polling shows the Tories are losing rural votes to Labour. The Prime Minister's used an unexpected appearance at the National Farmers Union annual conference in Birmingham, the first by a Prime Minister in 15 years, to pledge £220 million of a funding package. He also acknowledged the dark shadow cast over our agriculture sector by the war in Ukraine.
While, thanks to you, we enjoy good quality food all year round, global events, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine, have put food security back at the top of the agenda. And we'll never take our food security for granted. Putin set off not just an energy price bomb, but a food price bomb too.
In a moment, we'll speak to a farmer at the heart of this story. But first, my brilliant panel are here with me. Director of Communications at the Henry Jackson Society, making Gittoes, broadcaster and journalist Emma Woolf, and barrister and broadcaster Mr. Andrew Eborn. Very good evening to all of you. Fascinating story, this, about the food. But just before we get to that, and we'll probably talk to some more about it when the papers come in later as well. But basically, what do you make of the Prince William intervention, as it's being called? You know, I just think it shouldn't have happened. I don't think he needed to do it. And I don't understand what he gains by it.
I think, personally, I wasn't massively in agreement with your tweet. I think he's speaking to the hearts of a lot of people. And let's not forget, the royal family do have political benefit where they might not have it directly. And what I mean by that is this way of the British government putting pressure on Israel without them having to come out and say it? I assume that statement had to get approval.
I'm told it did get approval from the Foreign Office.
Yeah.
But I'm less concerned about that and what he said. I mean, what he said is not the problem. It's the fact that he said it, because as I've said earlier to Robert Jobson and Rafe, now he's going to have to pronounce on things, because if something terrible happens in the world,
you're right.
He's going to have to now say, well, I think that's awful as well. Emma?
No, I think he's been very careful. I think the royal, the King and Queen in waiting, William and Kate, have been very careful to make this balance. He's today been meeting people, humanitarian workers in Gaza, and in a few days' time he'll be meeting young people at a synagogue. So they're being balanced on both sides. I think it'd be really odd for William not to. It's not political. He's just acknowledging this is a big thing that is going on in the world. The royal family cannot continue. I know traditionally they've stayed out of politics. This doesn't need to be political. This is also about humanitarian suffering. On a huge
there's every
scale,
other war that's going on in the world.
I know there are. I know, and there are a million
He's
conflicts.
Going to be busy.
Look at the conflicts across Africa.
He could do one every day from now till Christmas.
He can't. He can't pronounce on everything. But this is a huge issue at the moment, and clearly, as parents, they feel, that they want to. I think he's done the right thing.
Okay, Andrew.
His words are absolutely right, as you say, Mike, so brilliantly. It's human cost. It's absolutely abhorrent. But he has to then pronounce on everything.
No, he doesn't.
But if it makes no difference,
but he may be asked to, is the point. He may not have to, but people will be now within their rights to say, well, what have you got to say about this?
Yes, and you're not as upset about this as you are about other things. And it's a very dangerous precedent on that basis. So the words are absolutely right, and I fully support what he said, but the problem is it now opens the floodgates, and the royal family traditionally have not commented on world events.
But he was the first senior royal to visit Israel and Palestine in 2018. And I think this is a cause that, William feels very closely connected with.
Yeah.
And I think it makes him more relevant to younger people. Yes, to younger people.
It may do. It may do. We'll see. Let's talk about something less contentious, or possibly not less contentious. Food. Rishi Sunak now looking for votes from the farming community. I mean, who's he not looking for votes from at this point? Because they've all gone, no, we're not voting for you, mate, sorry. I think he's got it a bit wrong, hasn't he?
Oh, no. I think that the NFU is a huge organisation, and they have been showed up by Labour a few times at this conference, this annual conference, especially in recent years. I know Labour leaders haven't typically gone, but I think it's might be a little too late for them.
Yeah.
I think they needed help when they needed help. When we were food insecure at the height of the Russia-Ukraine war, and farmers were dropping their usual arable rotation and switching to oilseed rape. I did one stint at a food manufacturer once.
Right.
Know a few bits. They did nothing. They didn't help. They didn't help with the fertiliser costs. And I think a lot of them, they've balanced the books in some way, so it might be a bit late.
I mean, I watched a farmer today talking to Vanessa Feltz from Scotland, who said that as far as government subsidy goes, they get something like 86 pounds per acre of land that they grow hops on, or whatever it is, they malt for beer and whiskey. And when it's sold, the final product, the government gets something like £38,000 in tax.
Yes.
So, you know, it's been a bit of a myth that farmers have been subsidised by the government for a very long time.
Yeah,
and
that is a
a lot of them are upset at the moment because of the green net zero pressures that are being put on them rather than the Ukrainian ones.
This is desperate from Rishi Sunak. His
Yeah.
approval rating, Mike, is what? -43%. The gap between him and Starmer is the widest it's ever been. So he is desperate. This is clear, blatant electioneering from the Conservatives. Desperate to get some votes, any vote, anyone. They'll go to nurseries probably next.
I mean, that'll be next.
But these are their Conservative heartlands. This is, do you know what shocked me? This is the first, as you said, the first Prime Minister in 15 years to address the NFU. That's how much the politicians care about the farmers.
Well, and they need to care, though.
They were always guaranteed. The farmers were always guaranteed, and I think that's what means too
And they
little
take
too
them for
late.
granted. And then they start bleating about the Ukraine-Russia conflict and the food insecurity. Yes, we have food insecurity and we should be growing our own.
Yeah.
But 20 years ago.
Right.
But it's interesting, if you look at the numbers, so Conservatives hold 96 of the top 100 rural areas. It's predicted they're going to lose half of those. That's why I wore my tie today with the fox and the chickens on in support. Not FU the NFU, we're going to sort that out. What I loved as well...
How is the fox and the chickens going to get on with each other, though?
Well, they love it. This is new harmonious thing.
Fighting away on his
I mean,
tie
I've had chickens that were eaten by foxes, so, you know...
It's the type of farms they have in
really,
children's.
It's not really a rural... It's not really a rural idyll.
If you've got chickens, you have to have a llama, because llamas will stamp on the foxes, apparently. That's what they do. Did you know that?
Right, well, that
And
starts...
then you need a dinosaur to stamp on the llama.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
where does it take
You need a machine gun turret. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
you start to get carried away. But I mean, whenever Rishi Sunak goes to a place and says something, it's almost as though he thinks that's all he needs to do.
Yes.
Like, I've got your back.
I've got
Everybody
your back.
knows, one, he hasn't got their back. Two, he doesn't mean it. Three, it's a soundbite, you know, for the evening news and for shows like this, rather than actually meaning anything.
But
It means nothing.
Because his rural constituency is in West Yorkshire, remember?
Yeah.
So he knows loads.
He does.
He owns a barber and he's definitely got a pair of waves.
And he also milked a cow, which is what I loved. He did that once.
Right.
It's a great experience.
I mean, but the food business in this country is also interesting, because the other thing that is a massive problem for farmers is the cost of their production versus the price they get paid by the supermarkets. Because I'm told the supermarkets have got a terrible lock on things like milk, on eggs, on anything that they buy sort of in bulk.
Do you
they
remember
set
when
the price.
they were doing that 4 pints for £1 milk in Iceland? And the farmers were getting almost, like, literally nothing for their milk.
Yeah.
It was almost not even worth them.
More on packaging is what happened on that basis. Outrageous. And you need to look at those statistics. People cannot survive at the moment unless you address these issues. So it's right that he should be doing this. Whether he's got those sort of people being persuaded, I think that's an interesting one. You've got a farmer coming on in a bit, haven't you?
We're hoping to, yeah, but I think he's having trouble. I think he's paid his phone bill because he hasn't got any money, so I think he's having trouble.
Can't afford it. Poor chap.
If the eco-warriors care about farms being eco-conscious, we need to invest in farmers. Let them have the innovation. You know, agriculture scientists and agricultural engineers, these are actual degrees to study. So let's let these kids...
Well, they go to agricultural college for quite some time, don't they?
Kids that come out of university create the green farms of the future, but for that to happen, less government subsidies and
But green farms of the
money in
future...
farmers' pockets.
Yeah, but green farms of the future don't need, you know, vast swathes of land given back to rewilding.
No,
so that you can have a few more butterflies flying around. That's not what we need.
I was more thinking energy efficiency.
Yeah,
more
don't
food.
need
but I mean,
turning up.
again, that's what's going on. They're being told you cannot, in the same way they used to be told to set aside fields by the EU, they're now being told set aside fields for rewilding because that's all part of the greening of the economy.
Yeah.
It's mad.
And the other thing that they don't probably need is Sunak turning up at the NFU conference and promising 220 million for a new generation of robots.
Yeah.
I'm sure that farmers, if you actually gave them some proper support, would develop, as you say, their own technology, the things they actually need
They
on
know
farms
exactly.
to produce food more efficiently.
Right.
But you should embrace technology, though, and there's a tremendous
Here's your
opportunity.
AI guy.
There you go.
AI, put the AI into Britain. You've got to look at that sort of basis. There are tremendous things you can do.
Yeah, until you get hacked by
To
the
put
Russians,
people out of
and
work.
then everything you've got in the field doesn't work
To
anymore.
put people out of
It won't
work.
put people,
You know.
there will be
Of course
new
it
jobs
will.
created.
That's
jobs,
what AI has done.
And it will also
Do you
create
know
new
how
jobs.
fast AI is going?
Oh, I do, absolutely.
Yes.
I'm encouraging it to go faster.
And do you know how many people it's put out of work?
300 million is
already?
what Goldman Sachs predicted, but it's going to basically be a co-pilot. If you understand how the technology works, it'll work on that basis. It is great for the farmers, and we can look at that sort of basis.
No one
There are
understands.
risks.
Well,
No
it's
one
great for the
understands
farmers
how
if
AI
they
works.
want it. It's not great for the farmers if they don't want it. I mean, more interestingly is what the Clarkson clause is going to do, because Jeremy Clarkson obviously has had all sorts of, you know, very well publicised rows with the local council about you know, whether he can have a restaurant, whether he can have people coming to his shop, whether people can park on his land. They're going to suggest that farmers can be offered that kind of ability so that they can... And there are an awful lot. I mean, even down in Sussex, there's loads of farm shops that you go to, which are fantastic. You know, they're probably, people would say, quite expensive, but the stuff is very good, and you know that it's good, and we know that...
And you are actually supporting local farmers.
Yeah, and we did a story last night about how the young Gen Zers are actually now moving back towards proper full-fat milk and full-fat cheese, because actually better for you, and it tastes better. Right? Now, if they can actually get away from... Because it's all very well taking the fat out of things. You take it out, you have to
add in a load
with
of
all
sugar.
sorts of other crap that you don't want to be eating. So there might actually be a new demand for it, but the government has got to be more flexible. And I think the trouble for most of us is we don't know how quite tightly controlled the food business is. Unless you're a multi-million-pound conglomerate, you don't get the best of it. It's like in America. In America, almost all dairy cattle now are sold to McDonald's. And almost all beef cattle are sold to McDonald's. So if you're a sort of individual cattle farmer trying to make your way somewhere in the middle of Iowa and Nebraska, you can't do it because McDonald's will squeeze you until you give all your money to them.
And that's the problem. It's the same with the big supermarkets as well. The reason they can do such ridiculously cheap prices. And when by the time you filter it down, you're left with nothing. And that's what's so important about this sort of stuff. Let's look at those figures and be realistic.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Because at the end of the day, you know, people have to eat.
Yes.
And they have to be given food. And so the government has to be good on that. I haven't really heard what Labour have got to say about this. Do they talk about food very much?
They did at the NFU conference a year ago, but I don't think they've caught up on this.
Well, it's extraordinary. If you
I
look
don't
at
think
the
they were
figures,
expecting
that they haven't
to
announced
grow.
any policies on this.
But they don't. In a way, they don't need to. They're up 17 points since the 2019 election at sort of 37% support, and the Conservatives are down 25 points, down to about 34%. And so you look at those sort of figures. They're obviously, by saying nothing, doing the right thing and taking just blame somebody else, and then the votes fall accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, because we end up getting wrapped up in all sorts of ideas about whether you should have taxes for this, whether we should steer people away from these particular products. You know, it's a bit of a minefield, isn't it, for political parties?
Yeah, it is completely. And it does link back to the story. I was listening to that story yesterday about people moving towards... Because there was going to be allowances and something farmers actually disagree with it. There was originally talk about tax incentives for vegan food. It's heavily processed food.
It's not good for
you. Very, very horribly processed.
Horribly processed. And actually, you know, lots of people switched to skinny oat milk, and they found themselves not getting any skinnier, but actually with full-fat milk, they weren't gaining weight, but they were getting a lot of protein and good fats and the things they need to actually, for their brain to work.
It's so important that people get informed decisions on that sort of basis. People need these facts and figures so they can make their own minds.
And a lot of these vegan food products, when they're not subsidised, they don't actually take off. And we now know a lot of the science-based evidence supporting these products is a bit weak.
Well, apparently one of the reasons why scientists told everybody to stay away from fats was because they didn't think the public would understand the difference between saturated fats and other fats. So they just thought everybody was too stupid to get it. So they just went, don't drink any of that. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, guys, we'll be back with you very shortly, I'm sure. You're watching The Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Stay watching us because we find out what happened when Alex Salmond met the Pope. And there's calls for the UK to sanction Russia over the death of Alexei Navalny. Thank you, guys. There are calls this evening for the West to respond to Russia with sanctions following the death of Putin opponent Alexei Navalny. Former Foreign Secretary William Hague has said leaders should unlock the £300 billion in frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's war effort as punishment to Russia. Meanwhile, social media platform X caused a stir when it briefly suspended the account of Alexei Navalny's widow, Yulia, after she accused Vladimir Putin of murder. Now, we were going to be talking to Bill Browder, but unfortunately we're having some technical issues. So instead, I'd like to bring back my panel, who are all here, ready and willing to talk about it. There are some who believe, I spoke to Chris Parry last night, former NATO commander, he thinks that actually Putin may not be in charge in the Kremlin anymore, and that there may already be a kind of a shadowy group of people who are sort of doing
it's an interesting
these things
thought
around him, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely interesting thought. And a very powerful Yulia's video, I don't know if you saw that yesterday, where she talked about rage, anger and hatred for those who dared to kill our future.
Yeah.
And very powerful. She said it's not a shame to do little, it's a shame to do nothing. But it's going back to how effective would these sanctions be? Because if Putin is not in power anymore and he's a puppet figure, which is an interesting thought, then what's going to happen? Because so far we've tried everything and there's been no effect on that sort of basis. You've had people speak on behalf of the Kremlin who turn around and say it's ridiculous and, of course, they had nothing to do with it. But the body, they say, is not going to come out for 14 days. Right. People are saying that by that time, Novichok or whatever it is would be out of the system. I don't know if that's right. But that's why they say they've hidden the body until this time. But it seems
you wouldn't need to do much, though. I mean, this man was held in a punishment cell. He was being slowly starved to death, frozen to death. You know, I mean, the conditions were absolutely appalling. So I'm not even sure that you would need to actually poison him.
No,
he was effectively killed by the...
He's had deteriorating health since last spring. And there was worries for his health where they hadn't heard from him for a while.
Well, I mean, this is a guy who survived being poisoned by Novichok, which most people don't actually normally do. But stay with us, because we're going to keep the panel here for another short section, or maybe even a long section. Who can say? You're watching The Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Later on in the show, a Jewish baby's birth certificate is getting returned from the Home Office, torn, and with the word Israel scribbled out. Unbelievable. Now, I'd like to turn your attention to the dramatic warning issued by outgoing UK Border Chief David Neal of serious security failures at London City Airport. Hundreds of high-risk private jet flights arriving from the Middle East and Africa landed in the UK without inspection from the Border Force, meaning potentially thousands of passengers evaded passport control and criminals, illegal migrants and extremists may have entered the UK without even basic scrutiny. You wouldn't have to ask Sherlock about that one. And now, of course, it means that the guy who was in charge of border security has been fired, for heaven's sake. I'd like to get a reaction on that one from my panel. Megan, what do you make of David Neal's warnings? And what do you make of David Neal's sacking? Because apparently he provided the Home Office with a whole load of different reports, which they were not quite ready to publish. He published a couple of them, and suddenly now he's out of a job.
If they weren't quite ready to... Did he get a clear instruction? I don't know. I won't comment on the legalities of him losing his job. One thing I do want to mention is I'm assuming that if people weren't checked for their passports, they also weren't checked for trafficked children and drugs.
Right.
Is that...
And possibly animals and
would
a
I
number
be
of
right?
other things.
Would I be right in thinking that?
Well, these were classified as high-risk jets that were flights that were arriving at City Airport. 80% of them, nearly 80% of them, have not been checked. The Home Office have now conveniently recategorised them to low risk, so that's absolutely fine. Nothing to see here. It's fine.
But presumably what should happen is...
But this David Neal guy, he's my hero of the week. He's absolutely brilliant guy. He's the head of the chief inspector. He's the inspector of border and immigration. It's a really, really important role. He's published 13 or more of
And he's
these
been
reports.
asked to do this by the Home Office,
he was asked to do it. But funnily enough, these reports haven't come to light. Yesterday, we had the issue of the care homes.
Yes.
Visas, thousands of visas have been issued to foreign workers coming over to work in care homes that, guess what, don't exist. These care homes were not even checked. The fault here is with the Home Office. They are calamitously failing to do any kind of security or checks on most of the people, most of the immigration issues, failing to protect our borders. This guy, he was due to leave his job in March. He's now been panickingly, whatever the word is, sacked by Cleverly
today, right?
Just today.
Right.
Terminated because he spoke to the Daily Mail about this data, about these Home Office.
You also, to put a bit of balance on this as well, the optics are not good.
We don't do balance here.
We don't do
Don't
balance.
waste your time.
Sorry, there is no balance on this one.
But the optics are not good, and in a vacuum, that's what happens. You turn around and say, he reveals the truth, and all of a sudden he's sacked. That looks appalling. The truth will out when there's a bit more, and I think to provide that balance...
Well, the truth won't out unless people are allowed to publish their reports. Exactly. He was the government inspector. What do they want? They want to mark their own homework?
You're absolutely right.
Would they like to redact the bits they don't like? It'd be a very small report. I mean, I don't think it's any secret the fact that there is no report
that the Home Office is completely
which is going to show them in a good
purpose.
light, because everything they do is basically kaput.
Sure. What have they said for the reason for the sacking?
Well, he was going to be leaving anyway.
Yes.
They've sacked him a month early.
Right.
They haven't said why they've sacked him.
I think they've said that he was revealing sensitive information and that he was speaking to the media. Well, how else is he meant to get his findings out there? And actually, most of us would quite like the airports to be checking passports.
Oh, absolutely.
No wonder the UK is seen as an easy target for drug trafficking, organised crime, people trafficking, and all the rest of it.
And also, if this was something other than the Home Office, this guy might be called a whistleblower.
Well, I was going to say,
because maybe he was told by somebody in the Home Office, well, we're not publishing that because it makes us look bad. Yeah. So he decided to get it out anyway.
But that's why the optics are not looking good.
The optics are not good. Normally, these inspectors get 2 terms. They get 2 3-year terms.
The optics don't look good for who, do you think?
Well, for basically the people trying to those who sacked him on that sort of principle.
But the optics
James Cleverly today panicked and sacked him immediately. He was due to finish in March.
Yeah, so you look at that sort of basis.
Doesn't look good.
It's exactly as Mike says. He turned around, he looks as a whistleblower, he's pointing out the truth of the optics, and as a result of it, he got the sack.
The funny thing
if we don't hear anything else from Cleverly as to why he's done that, then the force of public opinion is clearly going to be against them.
All right, then publish all his reports in full. He's actually not even it's not even as exciting as being a whistleblower. He's the inspector publishing the reports that he was commissioned to publish. It's the findings which are damning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's bring in former Chief Immigration Officer at Border Force in Calais, Kevin Saunders. Kevin, we've been talking about what happened to David Neal. What do you make of it? Does it look to you like he's been fired unceremonially because they didn't like the fact that he told other people what was in the report?
Good evening, Mike, and good evening to your panel. Can I, first of all, reassure your good self and your panel that everybody arriving in the UK is checked. These people arriving on private jets are checked. There is a procedure in place whereby every single one of the passengers, we know who they are, and that's fact. They're all checked. They might not be physically checked by an immigration officer looking at their passport when they land, but their details are all checked, and that's how we identify high risk and low risk passengers.
Yeah, but hang on. Hang on, Kevin. If you say that people are known, that means presumably they're on a manifest on the plane's record, right? But how do you know the person who's on the manifest is the person that's getting off the plane if you don't check the passport?
Because the person getting on, because at the point of departure, the person getting onto the plane has to present their passport.
Not necessarily.
So they have to be checked on going out.
Well, not necessarily. If they're on a private plane, not necessarily. If they're on a private plane,
private planes.
They're on a private
even
plane.
With private planes.
Right. So, but if they're trying to avoid being detected for whatever reason, they're not going to leave from Charles de Gaulle, are they? They're going to leave from a private airfield somewhere where there isn't going to be anybody checking them.
Even at private airfields, border force officers of that country will check the people getting onto the planes.
Well, I've flown on private jets only internally in countries in America and here, and nobody's ever asked me for any ID, ever.
Flying internally is different. If you're flying externally into the United Kingdom, you will be checked.
Well, why is Dave Neal saying that that's not the case? Why would he say that's not the case?
He's saying that's not the case.
Yeah. And at City Airport, David Neal is saying that that is not the case, that various private jets landed and they weren't checked.
That isn't quite correct. Mr. Neal has actually said that a high number of people weren't physically checked. High-risk people weren't checked. In fact, the information that Mr. Neal's team collected at London City was incorrect. Now, what happened? I can tell you what happened. His officers gathered the information. He presented the facts to the Home Office. The Home Office checked the facts and found that there was a huge mistake. They had given, the people at London City had given his people incorrect information. Now, that's going to have a knock-on effect for the officers involved and management involved at London City, who I suspect were going to be in a lot of trouble.
Well, I would have, hang on, Kevin, I'm going to let Evan Woolf have a word in a minute, but I would have more faith in what your version of the story is if it wasn't true that many of the people who come in illegally to this country Nobody knows who they are. They don't have passports. Nobody checks who they are. They come into the country regardless of whether they've got any papers, and any kind of, checking is a complete joke. Emma, what do you want to say?
I wanted to ask Kevin, firstly, what do you make of the fact that the Home Office recategorised those high-risk flights? They've just recalled them low-risk. So that's a way of avoiding. And how do you categorise those people?
If you're suggesting that the Home Office have deliberately
moved the goalposts,
moved the goalposts, well, I can't comment. I can only comment on what I know. And what I know is, from my sources, is that the information given was basically wrong. There are going to be some real red faces at London City. There really are. Don't look and see who's been sacked by the Home Secretary. Look and see who are the officers that are at London City who next week aren't.
Well,
because there will
we may well find out about that. But equally, as I said, the Home Office has no real place to go when they're trying to point to bits of it that work properly. I don't think there's any part of the Home Office that works properly at the moment. And so for them to say that this guy they fired got it wrong somehow and they've managed to get it right, it'll be the first thing they got right in about 5 years, won't it?
Well, that's a bit unfair.
I don't think it is unfair.
But the point is, the point I'm trying to make is the Home Office identified the problem. They then told Mr. Neil that they had identified the problem and what the true facts were. Now, as I understand it, Mr. Neil ignored the fact that the Home Office had given him new data and stuck to the old data.
Yeah. Well, maybe he doesn't think the new data's worth a faggot.
OK, but Kevin, are you saying that you can't take off from a small country? I mean, I've flown on a private jet from Kenya. No one checked anything, right? And you can fly in. So you're saying it's fine, in this country, we can be secure that they've been checked from their point of from their point of departure. That's absolutely fine. That we don't need to check people on the point of arrival into our country, into the UK.
If a private jet is arriving in the UK from Kenya, we will know who is on that plane. If we don't know who's on that plane will be intercepted by the RAF and it will be landing at a secure airfield.
So just to be clear, Kevin, the claim on the front page of the Mail today that high-risk aircraft are landing in Britain without security checks, you're saying that's not right?
I would say, from my knowledge, that is incorrect.
David Neil says 21% only of flights are checked. He's not, that's not 50%. He's saying 21% only. So nearly 80% of flights, private jets, are not being checked.
No.
Hang on, let's just get one question in from Megan. Megan, you got a question as well.
Kevin, nice to meet you. I just want to clarify, you say they've been checked. This is not me sounding like a conspiracy theorist, and you say you know who's on the plane, but there's just a lot of governments around the world can be quite hostile towards the West.
Right.
Afghanistan, like what if some of their people flew to Pakistan, which is not a crime, and then from Pakistan they flew to the UK, which again is not a crime. That's how these networks kind of operate.
And how it works with private jets.
And
you can
so,
just hand all the passports to the pilot, they take them off and then they come back. They're not checking people.
Well, that's the thing.
Is it too much to ask that high-risk aeroplanes, we maybe have a peek inside?
Well, I would have thought that's absolutely the case. And Kevin, listen, I don't want to be sitting here giving you a hard time. I know it feels like you're probably getting battered and bruised here, but I think, you're very nice. It's a very good thing for you sticking up to the Home Office, but it does seem a bit odd to me, and you don't speak for the Home Office officially, but it seems a bit odd to me to hire a guy to be the inspectorate of the Home Office and its various dealings in day-to-day operations, and then to disregard a report that he makes up saying it's not true, and then provide him with... I mean, why bother hiring him in the first place?
And 13 other reports.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't comment on the other reports that the Home Office have or have not said. I can comment on this particular issue because I've had dealings with it. I know how the system works. Now, if you think I am going to sit on a very popular TV channel like yours and tell you exactly how the Home Office and the security services are doing their checks, forget it, because I'm not. But believe me, the checks are being done, and I know they're being done. And I've seen the other end of the checks, because before I went to Calais, I was involved at Lyd Airport, or Ashford International, as it's now called, and that brings in private jets.
Right.
So I know how it's actually done.
No, I accept that, and I thank you very much, Kevin, for taking the time to talk to us. Appreciate it. Kevin Saunders there telling us why he thinks that actually they are doing the right thing at City Airport. But the funniest thing you've said, actually, is that Lyd Airport is now known as Ashford International. If anybody's been to Lyd, there's absolutely nothing international about it. Very nice little part of the world.
I think Kevin, in his defence, is just defending, like, what he and his
colleagues what has gone before?
Probably work really hard.
Yeah,
and honestly, he really held his own against.
No, he did.
Absolutely. Everyone just ran to get him.
But the story's not going to go away anywhere.
No,
but it was an it was an absolute denial. He said it was not. There are not high-risk aircraft landing in Britain.
Yeah.
And that's the whole story. This is the reason why the guy got sacked. He's saying it's not true.
And it's not a few percent.
We'll have more of it in a minute, because I've got to move on now. Thank you indeed for all of that. We're just going to talk on the subject of private jets, because I'm now joined by the founder of Ground Control, which is a Twitter account that tracks celebrities' private jets. This is a young man by the name of Jack Sweeney. Jack, welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. You don't track high-risk jets coming into Britain, probably, by any means, but it would be good if you did, because then we'd know who they were and where they were coming from. But what you do is you track celebrity private jets. How easy is that to do?
It's fairly simple. You know, you look up the ownership of who owns the jets, and usually you can find out through the name of the company that owns it or the address that it's registered to, and then you can track that jet and see where it goes.
Right. So can you only track jets that are owned by celebrities or ones that they've chartered?
For the most part, I mean, you can try to align like charter jets to like a high net worth individual like movements, like with Taylor Swift. She's been using charter jets lately, but people still know what jet she's using because it's like lines up with where she is in the shows and the concerts she has.
Right. But she's chartering them rather than owning the jet, is she?
Well, she did have 2 jets. Now she's down to 1. So she does own 1 jet, but she's chartering right now, probably because the one she's using to charter is a better jet and it can go a longer distance.
Right. And is it right that her lawyers have asked you, or have asked a court to stop you from doing it?
Yeah. They sent me a letter back in December.
Yeah. And so what's happening with that? Is there a case to be heard, or have you responded?
No, not really. You know, I mean, anybody can send a cease and desist letter, and it's pretty much just like that. Like, the tone of the letter kind of proves that it's just trying to, like, scare me off and get me to stop.
Right. And what do you get out of it other than just giving information out to other people? You make money out of it or not?
Not really, no. I mean, it's nothing I could live off of. It would be better for me to go work anywhere, really, and make a constant income versus something like this.
And how many celeb jets would you say you follow on a regular basis?
Well, so it's automated. The program, a software I wrote, and automatically posts it to social media. But back in the day, I did have like 30 accounts, but now it's like 10. But I'm planning on doing a website. I have a spreadsheet collected where we have like 400 to 500 jets, and that would be much better than just social media accounts.
Right. Have you ever tracked Harry and Meghan's jet?
I've looked into that, but I don't know if they actually own one or if they're chartering.
No, they don't. I think we should give you that assignment. They generally fly on other people's jets. They most recently flew on the head of Paramount's jet to Jamaica. And they normally try and hitch a ride up to, I think they went up to Canada for the Invictus Games, probably on the same one. So I think it's the Paramount jet. So we might come back to you and see if we can get you to track what they're doing. That'd be great.
I'm sure I have the Paramount jet listed somewhere.
Okay, well, we'll check that one out. Jack, thank you very much indeed. Jack Sweeney there.
Have a good night.
Giving us the lowdown. See, the great thing about America, a lot of people give their view of America as being a terrible place, but the great thing, I lived there for 10 years, it's so much more free than this country. I imagine if you try to do that in this country, tracking jets, which might not be a bad idea for that Home Office story, you could actually know where they were coming from,
I
Who's
love
on
this
them?
man. I love
Yeah.
this young man. This is the future. This is what people will be doing. Isn't it a life goal to get a cease and desist letter from
Yeah.
Taylor Swift's
I know,
lawyers?
yeah.
Wouldn't that be brilliant?
I know. It's like some of those people that get threatening letters from very, very powerful companies and say, you can't use this trade name, it's the same name as ours, and people will get confused. And you're going, I'm running a little corner shop cafe
Really?
you know, in the bottom of Newport.
A lot of celebrities have been really screwed over by this because it's kind of happens their lawyers just do it on retainer, so they do it automatically. And then they found out that they've destroyed like a single mum's business on Twitter, and they're devastated.
And the other side of that is that you have to protect certain things. There's something called doxing, which is revealing private information.
Yes.
What he's doing is actually revealing publicly available information and just assimilating it. So anybody could do it if they wanted to track it.
Yes.
And it's on that
Well, in the
sort of
same way, I presume that you can track aircraft. There's plenty of apps that you can use to track aircraft commercially that are flying around Britain.
And it's hardly kind of, you know, threatening Taylor Swift's security when it was well known that she was going to see her boyfriend at the Super Bowl and going back to her widely publicised tour in in Australia and back again. And
exactly.
Border Force should employ him, I think. They could make sure
they do a lot better with him than whoever they've got at City Airport. That's
exactly. There you go. There's a job for him.
Can I just clarify? Am I the only one on this panel that's not been on a private jet?
I think that must be right, yeah.
You can borrow
You have
ours.
to fix that.
I hope one of you will lend me yours.
You'll obviously have to fix that. I haven't been on many. The one I was on in America was a corporate one that was owned by Hanson, the
and I went on
building company. But the other one was Rod Stewart.
What?
Which
Oh,
was
wow.
Really?
Oh, that'd be rather fun.
Rod Stewart's one.
I really thought you meant like the three-person
Not the
band.
band.
I was really excited.
No. Hanson, they're actually a concrete company, which is a bizarre thing to have. This was even before I knew concrete was a thing. They flew me around to all their different quarries, and it was just the quickest way to do it.
Right.
In America, again, it's not as big of a deal as it is here because, you know,
because people are flying all over the country.
People fly all over the country. The distances are so vast that if you want to go from, you know, Chicago to New York to Boston in a day, you can't do it any other way.
Yeah.
It's starting to sound like a very expensive show, this, but anyway. Now, moving on. The vandals who took over Rishi Sunak's mansion in Yorkshire, plastering it in black cloth and signs demanding action on climate change, are set to be charged with criminal damage. 3 of them are, anyway. The group were part of the Greenpeace organisation, which campaigns for environmental reform, so-called in a peaceful way. I'm not sure what's peaceful, though, about vandalising someone's home, but that's just me. I mean, funnily enough, we spoke to Dale Vince yesterday, who used to bankroll Just Stop Oil.
Yes.
And he's now given up because they came out yesterday and said, we're going to start demonstrating outside people's houses and we're going to start occupying people's homes because our message isn't getting across. I think this is a really bad development, and I think it's good that these guys are going to jail. And I hope they might learn their lesson and not come out and do it again.
You're absolutely right. And the other lesson they should learn is that all of their tactics are just not working. I don't know anybody who's come out and said, we really support your cause as a result of what you're doing. They're alienating people. And the more that they can realise that, for what might be a legitimate cause for some of it, but they're alienating people who might otherwise support the cause.
Yes, exactly right. And, you know, the only people that really listen to them and agree with them are the people who genuinely think that we're in some kind of emergency. They don't know what emergency means. They think that
people who are lost.
4 or 5 years.
But everybody, all of us care about the environment. We care about the future of the planet. We really do. They are, as Andrew says, they're alienating people, but also they're really stepping this up. I think the police, this has gone on for too long, this nonsense.
It has.
The police need to step up they need to crack down on this, especially leading up to the next election. You can't let people disrupt normal people's lives. Stopping them from travelling, stopping them from going to work, doing their jobs.
And you can't, I mean, last summer it was almost expected, wasn't it, that whatever the sporting event was,
there would be Just Stop Oil
would come out with their orange powder. They did it at Wimbledon, they did it at the cricket, they did it at snooker.
Quite good on the green.
And I don't want to have to think that every time Keir Starmer gets up to speak or Rishi Sunak gets up to speak or whoever, that there's going to be one of these idiots throwing stuff.
Glitter,
because it's so pathetic.
And
it's dangerous. And I mean, if they did it in America, somebody would shoot them. You know? And I'm not saying that's what we should do, but...
The house thing, though, is disgusting, and it's becoming increasingly a problem with, like, more militant factions on the left.
It is intimidation.
People's kids are supposed to be off limits. There's kind of this rule in politics.
We've had 2 politicians murdered in recent
You don't
years.
go after people's kids, and I'm sorry, making a child not feel safe going to bed because they can hear shouting outside, that is going after people's kids.
And people shouting that, you know, your father's got blood on his hands.
They did it to Tobias Ellwood. It was just ex-Labour candidate.
It's absolutely
disgusting.
shocking. But I mean, and it does, I'm sorry to say, largely come from the left. They think it's okay to get in people's faces and shout at you because you disagree with them.
Because they've
I mean,
got it
I've
in
got
their
a
head.
great amount of abuse coming my way just because of what I said about Prince William's statement, you know, but it's all really horrible. You know, luckily I don't give a...
Funny, you know, the be kind, the wokey left mob are really hateful,
No, because-
really
they
abusive
really are,
in a way that the right are not.
But it's interesting, Mike, you say you got a lot of abuse. Actually, what you said about Prince William's statement was a fair comment, because you were saying what he said was right, but it's not his position to say it, because royalty, and you used Her Majesty...
I just don't think it was the right thing to do, as I've said. But,
Queen
you know, we
Elizabeth
could
managed to
disagree
dance
about that.
backstage.
The point is that
of
people
course.
from the left who have suddenly now become monarchists, bizarrely, when last week they were chanting on, you know, the side of republicanism because they hate the monarchy because they're all privileged fluffed up idiots who were born into it and went to Eton.
Trustafarians,
But now suddenly they all go, oh, we love Prince William. Isn't he great? You know, because he likes...
I would like every one of these Just Stop Oil zealots, you know, these Trustafarians, just to publish the list of their holidays and planes that they've taken in the past year.
I mean, how many
know
of them...
For a fact, they all go quiet over the summer because they're all on Mummy and Daddy's private
Well, how many
Caribbean
of them
islands.
we discovered, if you go back through their like Instagram accounts, they've been in Thailand, they've
Of course
been
they have.
in
And
Australia.
how did they get there, Mike?
They flew, funnily enough.
I think the biggest sign is willing to go to prison for the cause. I grew up on the poverty line, and there's one thing that privilege reeks when, and I know we hate that word, it's overused, but when you really do not care about going to prison, it's not a normal reaction to something.
Right.
It's because if I went to prison when I was 18, if I came out, my life's over.
Yeah, right.
My life's over. The repercussions are going to be felt for ages.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to live at home.
Right.
I wouldn't have had any money supporting me.
You'd have a criminal record.
I've supported myself through university since I was 16. There's no way I could have risked getting arrested.
No.
I would have ruined everything.
Of course.
You're absolutely-
And none of these people have jobs either, because if they did, they wouldn't be able to go and do what they do.
And the
Because
problem
one,
is
they wouldn't get
lost.
the time
They're
off.
looking for a cause, they're looking for a leader. They can find out all the stuff, the energy that they put into that. If they could put that into some good on that sort of basis and find out a good role model, that would make sense.
Or go and work somewhere where, you know, you can do some good in a
actually do some
country
good.
where, you know, or go and visit perhaps some of these horrible mines that are in the middle of Africa where children are being sent down to find what needs to be put into electric cars. And then maybe you'll work out that
Or go and
actually
work on farms.
it's not actually
Literally do
quite as
something.
nice as you thought, you know, because at the end of the day, it's absolutely ridiculous. One story that we haven't got yet in the front pages of the papers, but is a bit of a different tack, is this story about men's and women's brains.
Yes, glorious.
This is always a good one.
Men are from
Now we
Mars,
can do
women
this
are from
perfectly
Venus.
even-handedly because there are 2 women and 2 men on this panel.
Yes.
So, I mean, like all of these studies, they don't normally really tell you anything you didn't already know.
Yeah.
You know, when you scientifically examine the fact that, you know, women are better at some things than men are and men are better at some things than women are, it's not that surprising, is it?
No, it's not surprising, but I would have guessed it. I would have guessed it anyway, just based on the female monthly cycle. It could be divided into 4 weeks where her behaviour, even how dizzy you are.
Yeah.
It's there's a certain week of the month where I can't keep anything in my hands without dropping it,
Yeah.
and it's not just in my head.
Right.
It's real. Hormones play a huge part, and I guess it's triggered by the brain. I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
It was Stanford University did the study, and this is what they did. They did a wide, it's the first time they ever did,
a big study.
supported by AI, you'll love that sort of stuff, and AI, artificial intelligence, said the results of this, they could tell...
Was it male or
90%.
female artificial intelligence?
Well, a bit of both.
Because that
actually.
depends, doesn't it?
It does depend.
Obviously, you may have made different conclusions.
Absolutely, but they got it with 90% accuracy just on brain scans.
Yeah.
They could say whether somebody was male or female.
And that's what's interesting about this study.
That's really
it's
interesting.
kind of debunking the myth that it's mostly nurture and that it's
Yeah.
society. They're saying no, it's biological. There are biological differences in the brain, in the prefrontal cortex, in the different regions of the brain.
Yeah.
And by scanning them, as you say, you can actually tell. And I think this is so true. Having spent tedious amounts of months over the past 3 years in baby groups and nursery groups, looking at baby girls and baby boys and watching how they are. The boys and my son are in the corner smashing things up, building tractors, kicking them down and playing in one way.
Yeah.
The girls generally, and this is always a generalisation, the girls are generally in the corners with their dollies, playing constructively, playing collaboratively, being empathetic. I do think there are clear differences between men and women.
And what's interesting in the
there
study
are.
as well, they said that women are twice as likely as men to experience clinical depression, for example, while men are more at risk of drug and alcohol dependence and dyslexia. and they're working on that sort of basis. And they say it's to do with the brain, it's not to do with nature.
You're also 10 times more likely to go to baby groups because, you know, having had 4 children, I didn't go to any baby groups.
You didn't have to, Mike, but that's to do with structural
Well, no, but I mean,
sexism
some men try to do it and try to get in with it, but they're
weird.
But I mean, I wouldn't trust a bloke that goes to the baby.
No, I don't.
Because they're just
They're
not
weird.
normal.
I actually
you know?
like this study, and it's a bit what you were saying about the baby groups. because
Yes.
You sometimes wonder when you're alone with your thoughts, you think, am I the way I am because society's made me this way? Should I be unpacking my femininity? No, I'm glad to know I don't
Is that
have
what you really
to.
think about?
Well, sometimes I do.
Blimey.
Sometimes, because you see it on the news that you only like these things because society's told you to. And sometimes I just want to be, I don't know, unapologetically female.
I think so, and I think
And I'm so glad you said that
female
about
is quite right.
the
It's bad
baby
news, of
group
course, this
thing.
for the whole gender brigade, isn't it?
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
they can't
This is
get
the
their heads
problem.
around it
No,
because
no.
they'll go, well, that can't possibly be true because if you're telling me that you're biologically a woman and I can't be one, then you're a bigot, obviously.
Would it be interesting, as you say, to do there's a survey of the brain to turn out to what extent that might happen, where people
because this
believe
could
they're
actually,
in the wrong body?
But this could benefit some trans people.
But things
Yeah,
have
it might do.
changed
It might be
a
a
lot.
benefit.
Things have changed a lot in recent years, and people are wondering whether things like, say, the female pill being washed into rivers, all the kind of hormonal disruptions that we've had, whether that is actually affecting men as well, and that we have, I mean, I'm not going to get myself in trouble
It's
by
a never-ending story. It's good. The other one that's good today is the number of different words for drunk. I mean, the best thing I heard about this today was that it's a bit like the Eskimos who have so many different words for snow.
Yes.
Because that's what they talk about a lot.
That's so
Clearly, we
funny.
have an awful lot of words
You
for
can use
drunk.
any word for, you know, banjacks.
Yeah.
My favourite was gazeboed.
Yes.
And also, it's posh people. If you say, a posh person saying, oh, it's completely and utterly gazebo, they can say anything and it will make sense. I was, you know, 1 over the 8. I was totally Mike Graham.
Right.
I was totally off the... Like, anything that they say.
Although I was listening to a guest on Rosanna and he said, actually, there's also nuance in it because sloshed doesn't mean as bad as hammered.
Although that's
No.
You know, if you're sloshed, that's kind of tipsy,
Yes.
but you're not really too drunk. But if you're hammered, you're absolutely off the scale.
Absolutely
And
hammered,
it's Michael McIntyre who said, I got completely ...
He came up with the gazeboed one.
And then you fill in, and that was gazeboed,
Exactly. I was completely Emma Wolfed.
I think we've got...
I don't know. I haven't drunk for about 5 years.
I think we've got a Michael McIntyre clip, which will be the first and ever time we ever have it on this show, I think.
There you go.
Yeah, I hope so.
Most people have a variety of words for drunk. You can have, you can be wellied or trousered or assholed. I was rough. You can actually use any word in the English language and substitute it to mean drunk as a posh person. It works. Did you have a drink last night? You joking? I was utterly gazeboed. It fits.
The first time I came across strange words for being drunk was actually in America when I moved there because a lot of people there had different words.
They have silly words for drunk, and they don't get drunk properly as well.
Well, they do. They do. I mean...
But in a sort of over the... Yeah,
it's
drinking an entire keg of beer kind of way.
They don't just do it spontaneously like we do, where we just kind of go to the pub and suddenly we're drunk.
Yeah.
They have, you know, spring break.
Yeah.
Florida
and frat parties,
you know,
where they drink dangerous
amounts.
amounts.
Backsides, and it's all a bit tasteless. But the proper professional kind of bar drinkers in New York do know how to drink, and that's quite good. But they had strange words like sway baked was one.
Right.
Puzzled was quite good. I
That's
quite like
not
puzzled.
good. Puzzled?
Puzzled, yeah, because you're kind of puzzled.
A little bit puzzled, yes.
You can be...
I know, but it's very unclear, because you could say, I was very puzzled last night. You wouldn't realise that someone means blind drunk.
And what's the thing? I mean, I guess it's all...
I was completely puzzled.
Blotto. I think we have to agree. Blotto is probably the best word ever.
Blotto's good, yeah.
Or the Cockney rhyming slang,
I mean,
Brahms
piss
and lists.
is as good as it,
yeah.
isn't it? I mean, just stick
Brahms
with
and
that.
lists, absolutely.
Brahms and lists, there you go. Now, how about this before? You're not drunk when you see this. This is the biggest snake in the world, I think. It's 26 foot long. Anaconda. And there's a guy getting very close to it. These things, I presume, are amphibious.
Looks like a man. That's on the floor.
Down the bottom of a river. I don't think I'd be going anywhere near it. World's largest snake.
Good heavens.
It's not actually the world's largest snake. It's only the world's largest snake as far as we know.
Yeah.
Is
that Border Force checking them in?
Yeah, that's them checking them in. Yeah. Fancy coming to City Airport. Don't worry, we can smuggle you in along with the 2 lions and the 3 members
Which
of
have
the
all been
Mujahideen
carefully
from
checked at their
Afghanistan.
point of departure.
Unbelievable. You're watching the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Coming up next, the minister tries to defend the government's ridiculous woke army recruitment drive and all the top lines from tomorrow's papers as well. front page of the I newspaper is the first one we've seen on William and his statement about Gaza. Royal diplomat says the UK has deployed Prince William to call for the urgent Gaza ceasefire as part of a sort of Western offensive, which is very interesting.
They did speak. The Foreign Office did speak to the palace, didn't they? And very carefully worked out William's statement. So it's clear.
Yeah.
It's sort of odd. Are they suggesting that he was sort of being deployed? Well,
I mean, they
deploy him to call for a ceasefire.
Yeah. I think that's wrong if it's true.
Well, it's a dangerous precedent for the reasons we've said. And so, absolutely, we fully endorse the sentiment. It is abhorrent, but royals don't normally comment on these things. There's a reason for this, about not interfering with politics. And we should say, actually, it is 10 years ago about Crimea, because that was on this day, February the 20th, Vladimir Konstantinov, the Speaker of Crimea's regional parliament and a Russian politician, said he didn't rule out the peninsula's return to Russia. So it's all that sort of anniversary around now, which is why the focus is here at the moment.
And, of course, the 2-year anniversary of the invasion, Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, well, I mean, he could have said something about that if he'd wanted to, but instead he said this about Gaza.
They do comment on other ways, and we say let's not involve them in politics, but we often deploy them. It's just not so in your face. I do think you're right. It does create a precedent because I cover this when I do my research on conflict-related sexual violence. It's everywhere, and we only mention it a quarter of the times. And
it pops up.
We do have morality levels.
Yeah, of course.
And certainly when it comes to Arab Muslims, we seem to care about their lives more as a society in the West than we do about African Muslims' lives, who are also suffering a genocide.
Well, nobody ever talks about the genocide in Africa, and I don't understand why that is. It really...
There's a few of them. There's a Muslim one in China happening right now, and they're not boycotting China because that would actually be hard. To boycott Israel is easy because you just there's tech apps and soda streams.
And it's a general problem, isn't it? Because the media seems to just shine a spotlight on one issue, and then you forget the others.
And it's not the media necessarily doing it. It's the fact that politicians also do it. And politicians, I mean, it's not an accident that Keir Starmer's Labour Party is embroiled in a row, not about Myanmar, not about, the Uyghur Muslims in China, but about Israel. There's a reason for that. And we all know what it is. Let's talk about the front page of the Metro. This is something I referred to a little bit earlier. Ministers were told in 2016 how the investigation that could have helped thousands was ditched. So I think we're going to find more of this in the wake of the Kemi Badenoch outrage this week, where she was sort of tempted to take the moral high ground, and there really isn't any in this story at all.
Well, it's extraordinary.
It seems like the government knew a lot more than we were told.
And we always have these absolute denials, as we had on this very programme tonight about a particular story. So you look at that sort of basis. They're saying that Sajid Javid, he was told in 2016 that an investigation was underway into how accounts had been changed remotely. I mean, this was the big scandal, wasn't it?
Exactly
how that could happen.
We've only got about 30 seconds left. Milkshakes could be hit with a 24p a litre fat tax. The Lib Dems apparently want to do this, so obviously it won't happen. They won't get into power.
Happen, but I do remember...
And it shouldn't happen either, by the way.
It shouldn't. It's a treat. I do remember as a child drinking those, I mean, I'm sure they're terribly over-sweetened, those chocolate milks. What a treat, like just once in a while.
As long as it is a treat and it's not every day, but no point
of course,
taxing
don't feed them to
because it
children.
doesn't stop people drinking them, it just makes the government more wealthy.
And it doesn't really affect.
And it's the knock-on effect for the farmers is what they say as well, because they say you'll decrease the demand for milk.
But Mike, that's the point. It does not stop. It's like smoking. Honestly, as a former smoker, they could have charged 20, 25, 30 pounds a packet.
Still going to buy them.
You still pay.
Yeah, it's like the ULEZ. If you want to make the air clean, don't make people pay to drive in it. It's as simple as that, but there we are. That's it. Thank you very much indeed. That is the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. We will be back, of course, tomorrow night from 8 o'clock. Thank you to everybody on the panel. It's been a rocky old night, but we got there.